What's going on? My name's Robert and you are watching Southpaw Auto Works. This is the AOD. In this video, you are going to get an inside look at what it takes to disassemble the Ford 4-speed automatic transmission known as the AOD. This video will be led by Andy, who will be including some disassembly tips and tricks that are specific to the AOD. He'll also be including some tips and tricks that are a bit more universal, meaning they can be applied to the disassembly of just about any automatic transmission. Without further ado, let's get the show on the road.
All right, we're going to be doing a disassembly for you here on the Ford AOD transmission. Okay, a couple things I just wanted to point out of kind of interest here on the AOD you may not be familiar with. First thing is that notice on the front of the transmission here, we don't just have an input shaft and a stator shaft. We've got a third shaft here, also known as a main shaft. Okay, and it's kind of unique to the AOD in that they have this separate direct drive shaft. I'm going to show you where that splines into on the inner end there, which is the little direct drum way down in the bottom of the transmission. But Ford come out with this transmission about 1980, put it in their Grand Marquis and Lincoln Town cars and stuff, and this was their first idea to kind of help with the fuel mileage and so forth. But this did actually end up creating some minor issues, and I'll kind of cover that a little bit later probably in the video, but I just wanted to point that out as far as differences, because you'll see pretty much any other transmission on the market, you're just going to have an input shaft and a stator shaft, not this extra direct drive shaft. So we'll get the tail housing off. I'm going to go ahead and, if I had a hammer, knock the seal out. So once again, just kind of a flat chisel here. Knock the seal out instead of chasing it around on the bench when the housing's unbolted. Take that off. We've got a transmission bracket or mount on the bottom of the extension housing we need to get out of the way because we can't get to the rest of the bolts. Other way. We'll go ahead and get our extension or tail housing off. That's our size also. Found the speedometer. This still has the electronic speed sensor in the extension housing. Prior to that would have been just a conventional speedometer cable itself. Okay. Some of these came in a different variety, just to let you know. You had electronic here. You had a cable that plugged in here. You had one or the other, or both, depending on the year, the model, and so forth. Now, what we've got on the back here, we can go ahead and take off is the governor itself. We've got a snap ring here. Another little bit of information just to tell you about, because most people are not familiar. You got this little rubber plug thing back here, okay, on the back. A lot of the Ford transmissions seems to be back here on a lot of them. Guys wonder what in the heck the function was on that. That was actually a shipping plug, and when the extension housing and the trans and everything was installed, they shoved that rubber plug in here around the back of the extension housing, keep any contamination, dirt, bugs, and birds and shit out of there, okay? So when they put it in the car and they slide the drive shaft in, that simply pushes that seal forward on the shaft, and it lives there the rest of its life until we disassemble or cut it off there, and that's what I usually do. I take a razor blade and cut it off because they become like rock hard, brittle, okay? But it serves no function for us, okay? So I'm going to rotate that around, see if we can get to the snap ring here. Yeah, we got her started. Okay, take that off. Then, this should slide directly back off the shaft, but it can be a pretty tight fit. So we may have to walk it back and forth with a screwdriver or some means. Okay, yeah. She's moving just real slow. There is a ball, an actual steel ball on the output shaft, if Robert can see that. Oops, already fell out. Just trying to put that back in there so you can see what I'm talking about. That steel ball sits in a hole there, okay? And that keeps this governor locked to the output shaft, okay? That's how they make sure that it's attached to that. So that will fall out at some point as you remove the governor. There's our governor, and there's a little slot that the ball sits in to lock it to the output shaft. Okay, so we're ready to take the pan off. Looks like this linkage arm here for the throttle valve or throttle valve pressure is bent in towards the transmission. I'm going to push that out just a little bit with the screwdriver. It's kind of leaning against the pan. Just want to get it out of my way. Once again, as I tell you in the other videos, I leave one bolt in the pan, loosened up a little bit, just to hold her in place. Okay. Nasty ass fluid plus a little water in there. Okay. A little bit of clutch material, band material, and other stuff in there. Filter is held on by 3 bolts, here, here, and here. Peel that off. Be aware when you're working on one of these, even maybe just doing a transmission service, there is a gasket that goes on the filter as well as a rubber seal itself. Okay, gasket does not come on the filter, it's usually loose. So what I do is I tack that on with a little bit of spray adhesive, grease or something. So when you're installing your filter, that gasket does not fall off. Very common problem for guys servicing them and not being aware of that gasket.
Real quick, if this content is adding value, please let us know by hitting that like button. It does help the channel and we do appreciate it.
Okay, valve body, we got about 97 bolts on here. These are a couple different lengths. We'll go over that if we show you that in the, if we do a build video on this. But just be aware, are a couple of different lengths of bolts for reassembly. Got the detent spring and roller right here, all held on by a bolt. All right, we've got all those loose. Lift that baby right off of there. Okay, we've got 2 servos here that have to be removed. Okay, rear one not so much to get the transmission apart, but the front one definitely makes our job easier. And then these other 2 guys here are accumulators, not necessary to remove just to get the transmission disassembled, but we will take those out at some point there. They do make a compressor tool that can bolt to a couple of the valve body bolts and push in on this to allow us to get our snap ring out of here easier. Okay, I don't happen to have the tool. I've always just kind of picked it out of there. Okay. Using a pick, using pocket screwdrivers, whatever the case may be. There is spring tension behind it, so be aware of that when you do release the snap ring out of there. It's not an exact science or anything, but what we're going to do is get on there some way or another. Work that snap ring out of there. Like I said, once again, there's some spring tension. So when we go to release that snap ring, kind of keep a hand on that. Probably going to stick in the bore a little bit. There we go. not too bad. All right. That's known as the Overdrive servo. Applies the Overdrive band itself. Spring, piston, cover. Okay. While we're here, we'll go ahead and get the low reverse piston out of here. Same thing. I'm just using a pick. Trying not to stab myself. Spring tension behind that also, so hang on to that a little bit. Tap that. A little, what they call a molded servo cover seal there. Something you'll replace during the overhaul. All right. Then I just give this a little push. Springs back out on you. There's a return spring and the servo piston itself. Also a molded rubber. So we don't replace just the rubber, we replace the entire piston itself during our overhaul.
According to my analytics, many of you have not subscribed. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on any future videos.
Okay, we'll get around to the pump. Now let me stop here for just a second. We did have a comment on the 400 disassembly video. Gentleman mentioned that I did not check the end play of the transmission during disassembly. So on this transmission, what we would do here is grab this shaft, not the little guy, okay? Grab this guy here, pair of pliers or something, okay? So we're doing end play check on this transmission, front to back movement of the components inside there, okay? This would give us an idea of how much end play we have compared to whatever the specification is, okay? Knowing whether when we reassemble that we might have to change a washer or something to minimize that or reduce it a little bit, okay? Okay, getting the pump out. We've got multiple different ways. If you happen to have one of the pump pullers that can clamp onto the pump itself, would grab around here on the stator, and then you would thread this in, pushing here. That would pull the pump back out for you, okay? Another option you could have, if we have got some bolts up here somewhere, okay? You don't have the tool, doesn't matter. Take a couple of bolts, thread them into the pump itself. You'll notice two of the bolt holes are threaded. Thread those in, and then you could use a little heel bar, pry bar, whatever the heck they call these things, and you'd come in here and hook the head of that bolt, okay? Probably the easiest way for most people because you're not going to have a pump puller available, okay? And simply do that number, okay? Something that's readily available to you without having to buy the pump puller itself, okay? This is not a trans that we can get in behind with a pry bar sometimes and cheat and pop that pump out. There just isn't the room to get in there. So this would probably be our best option, okay? Let me show you one more way that I used to use for many years, and that's using a good old slide hammer, all right? You will need the adapter to go from this larger thread down to the pump thread, but then we would just simply put that in there, use the slide hammer, pull the pump out. Pump's going to come out. We'll go ahead and split that real quick. Right. That simply separates like that. This is the washer, that I mentioned. This comes in different thicknesses, known as a selective washer. Okay. There's a number on here somewhere. Number 3, very common number on this transmission. All right. That would be the guy that we would change if we needed to control the amount of end play inside the transmission. Pump cover or pump stator itself. All right, we'll do a quick inspection on that. Looks pretty good where the gears right there. There's our pump gears, has the same type of pump as that 400 we disassembled, what's known as the crescent style. Okay. Gears come out of there. I, once again, just replace these as an automatic, if you will, when I build them. Okay. Just so you know, on the back side of your pump right here, you've got a set of springs, okay, and a piston. That's for the intermediate clutch pack. The only thing retaining this is 3 little tabs here, okay? And what you do is come in here behind that retainer, bend those out just a slight bit, okay? And then peel this guy off of there, okay? He lifts right off there, okay? Goes back together, just literally snaps in place, okay? And then our piston that goes in there for the intermediate clutches, 2 lip seals on there. Bushing and seal, of course, we just automatically replace when we rebuild the transmission. Okay. Next, we've got some intermediate clutches to get out of the case itself here. We can hook those usually and pull them. Sometimes you can grab the shaft for that drum and pull them out if the band will let you sneak past it. Okay, sometimes it gets stuck in there. So we'll just pick these out. Steels, frictions, and then lastly the pressure plate itself is coming with the drum. All right. That would be our intermediate clutch pack right there. All right. Now we can get our drum and our overdrive band out. Okay. One side anchors to that servo piston, the other side anchors to the case itself. Pump gasket. Now we can snag the drums out of there. Okay. There's what would be our input shaft or turbine shaft and forward drum. Okay. And this would be a reverse clutch or reverse input clutch itself. This surface here is where your band rides for overdrive. That does have a one-way clutch on the back of it. Locks in one direction, freewheels the other. We'll go over the inspection on some of those. And of course that direct drive shaft can come out at any time. All right. Then we've got a hub that comes out for those forward clutches. Torrington bearing on there. And a sun gear shell comes out. Once again, 2 sun gears, another bearing there. Now, we're down to the center support. It's got a large snap ring holding that in place down in the case itself. Down in here, and wraps all the way around back to here. We've got to get him out of there. Screwdriver, pick, whatever the case may be. That's the snap ring we've taken out. And underneath that guy, we're looking for another little spring in here. Okay, it's gonna maybe hard to see, but right down in here, all right, little curly Q spring. Okay, he likes to wear into the side of the case so it'll stick in there. Kind of makes it tough to get it out of the case itself. All right, so we've got to get a screwdriver underneath one end of it, pick it. Be aware on this guy, we may get a little action of that baby popping out of there or flying out of there. Okay. There we go. That's the guy we were trying to get out. What happens is one end of this rests against the case, and it tends to dig into the aluminum case over time. So it makes it a little tough to get removed. Now we're going to reach in the center of this center support and planetary and try and pull this out together. All right. There's our center support. If Robert can get a close shot of that. Right there is where that spring was resting against that. The other end resting against the case itself. But you can see the wear mark right there on that center support. All right. Obviously, this has had water in it for some time because we've got rust on the Planet, the drums, and so forth. Just to show you here, we've got a one-way clutch hidden underneath this center support itself. Okay. Another item we'll inspect. And what I'm also seeing here is of concern, we've got a wear mark here where it looks like the shell and the center support have come in contact where they're not supposed to be. Okay, so we need to look real close inside this unit to find out why did this shell move rearward so far in the transmission as to cause damage to that center support. May have been during a previous repair, but we definitely need to investigate that when we're in the unit. Okay, a little different Planetary than is in the GM and a lot of the other ones. They call this a ravigneaux gear set. Okay, short and long pinions in here and two different sun gears that fit, excuse me, down inside. Okay, another clutch hub. Then we got a band in here, grab opposite the side that it anchors. Yank that out. And then we reach in here and try and grab this whole output shaft, direct drum assembly. I'm assisting that by pushing in on the output shaft. There's our output shaft, rear ring gear, and we've got another little set of clutches down in here. The direct clutches here, right? And also to show you that other input shaft, if you will, okay, or direct drive shaft, that's one we saw at the front of the trans, okay? Splines directly down into that clutch pack, so that guy's being driven all the time by the converter at engine speed. A little different setup than your other transmissions, and we'll probably be doing a transmission or a torque converter video, and I'll explain that to you on how that works. Finish the back side of this as far as disassembly. Got a snap ring around here. Snap ring down there. Output shaft comes off. Torrington bearing to support that drum. Flip that over. And there's our last set of clutches in the back. Common failure area on the AOD trans is this clutch back here. Okay, we've got another loose washer that would have gone down in there. Very back of the case, Torrington bearing. Rides in the very back of the case. Pretty well emptied the inside. Side note here, down inside the case, you've got another snap ring down here. Lonely guy just sitting down there, doesn't seem to provide much function. That was actually an assembly aid that the factory put in there. And the reason for that was they put that snap ring in there, just set her down in the case. And then when they would install the low reverse band, okay, that helped to hold that band in place so it didn't drop too far during assembly, okay? So when you get the case all apart and you're going through everything and you've got this guy left over and trying to figure out what his function is, that was it. It's just an assembly aid. Goes in, band sets against it, keeps it from falling too far down into the case, and thereby, if it fell too far, your servo piston would miss the point of contact right here. It would slip down here and you would have no manual low, no reverse. So that's all that is. quick point of inspection on the case. Common wear area right here in this bore, okay? Output shaft rides in there, and we've got some metal sealing rings. They like to cut up the back of the case back here, so we've got to make sure she's nice and smooth. Any grooves, any damage in there, they make a tool to bore that and put a sleeve in to save the case so you don't have to replace it. Last two things here, take out our accumulators here and here. Got some different pliers. See if they're big enough. Okay, snap ring to remove this accumulator back here. Spring tension on there. Hold our thumb or something against there. Snap ring and the retainer for the spring. There's our spring. And then the accumulator piston itself, a pair of snap ring pliers or something to grab a hold of that. Take that out. And pretty much the same thing up here for our other accumulator. Onto that. May or may not have a spring. Ford changed their mind during production, about 8-9 years after production. They used a spring there, then they got rid of the spring. They couldn't make up their mind. Then they eliminated the whole accumulator itself. So that's what I do, just take out pliers and yank on that. No spring in this one. Not necessary to take the park pawl and the pin and everything back here. You can leave that in, wash the case. I don't normally remove that. We will have to take the linkage out of the case here because there is a seal we need to access to replace for overhaul. That would require moving the nut, the outer linkage, and then there's a roll pin right there if Robert can get a shot of that. That roll pin has to come out of there. That's what keeps that shaft located in the case so it doesn't walk in or out too far.
This show is a lot of hours to produce, and we could really use your help. Believe it or not, there are a number of ways that you can get involved. Check out the video description down below to learn more. Got AOD questions or just want to say hey? You can drop us a line in the comment section down below. You just got done watching a video that's on the AOD teardown. We recently did a teardown video on the Turbo 400. You can find a shortcut to that video in the video description down below as well. We've got a lot more in store for you. We're going to be covering more automatic transmissions manufactured by the likes of Ford, GM, Chrysler, and we're also going to be diving into some imports too. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to hit that notification bell too so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Once again, my name's Robert and I will see you next time.